All right. This is your man, Laird Mayhew, a.k.a. the Cigar Sherpa, coming at you with another video. Today's not really a review. I am going to be talking about the age-old question. Any experienced cigar smoker has heard it and run into it. Are Cuban cigars really the best cigars in the world? And or are they worth the money? It's not a very simple yes or no question to answer. While I'm doing this, I am smoking a Cuban cigar. I'm smoking a Cohiba Siglo 4. Did you hear that? I thought that was the Cohiba police coming to tell me if it was real or fake. This cigar was actually secured out of a S.A. Habanos store in Istanbul, Turkey, by a very good friend of mine and cigar connoisseur. So if you guys want to blast me on how it's fake, feel free if you can get a good picture. But it's real. Another way I know it's real is because I can taste that it's real. I have a lot of experience with these cigars. Back about 22 years ago when I got into cigars, I couldn't wait to get my hands on a Cuban cigar. 1 second. Don't want this thing to go out. And my all-time favorite cigar is still to this day the Cohiba Robusto Habano. Now, if I'm totally honest with you, I was in love with that cigar before I ever even smoked one. But I was lucky. My father traveled a lot internationally. So right when I got into cigars and I kind of developed this passion for him, and I requested him, he brought me a few. First, it was a Cohiba Esplendido, and then on the next trip, he bought me a half a box that he split with some other people of Cohiba Robustos, and they're good cigars. Now, to the question of if they're better than every other cigar out there, I am going to answer that by saying no, they're not. Cuban tobacco does have a very distinct taste, flavor, and aroma, and it's good, okay? But you can't say that it's necessarily better than tobacco from Nicaragua, Honduras, or, Dominican Republic. What gives the Cuban tobacco the distinct flavor is not just the climate or the seed, because you can take Cuban seed tobacco and you can plant it somewhere else and it's going to come out tasting slightly different, or a lot different in some cases. And a lot has to do with the soil, the way I understand it. And I ain't no botanist, I don't have a degree in this shit, but the Cuban soil in the area where they grow it, and I can't remember, it starts with a V. It's in the northwestern part of Cuba, the Port of Vallarta, maybe. It's very rough soil. It's like volcanic rock soil, okay? So any plant that grows there really has to struggle to survive. So what that does is it produces a very hardy plant. If anybody's ever grown plants inside in their closet, it's always recommended to have like a fan blow in on there. It kind of gives them that rigidity so they stand up. But with that, the roots have to really fight through that tough soil. And with that, it produces a very coarse or hardy leaf, okay? That, along with the climate, is what lends the flavor to Cuban tobacco. If you take that same plant and you take it up here where I'm from, North Carolina, where we grow tobacco, very lush soil, very soft soil, those roots are just happy as they can be. And you get tall plants, you get nice thin leaves, they grow faster, and it's a lot more smooth, which is why we're known here in North Carolina more for cigarette tobacco, because it's real smooth. And excuse me for pausing, but I got to keep this bad boy lit, because again, I don't want to hear from the Cuban cigar police about how I let a Cuban cigar go out and I got to light it back up. But anyway, My opinion is no, they are good, and I like Cuban cigars. I don't like all Cuban cigars just because they're from Cuba. Don't make them good. In my opinion, Nicaragua probably sets the standard now for cigars, and I'll tell you why. It's not just the flavor of the tobacco, but the construction, the quality control, and the blends that they're able to use. The Cuban cigars use only Cuban tobacco, and the way it works is like this: 1959. I'm a farmer in Cuba, and I am growing tobacco and selling it or making cigars even. Man, I had a factory. Castro and his boys roll up, the socialists roll up, and they say, okay, I tell you what, from now on, 90% of the tobacco that you grow goes to the state. You get to keep 10%. How you like that deal? And the Cubans that preferred breathing over not breathing said, yeah, sure, okay, why not? So what they do is, they send all of the tobacco from their farms to like central warehouses, and that's where they sort the leaves. So in a Cuban cigar, you may get a Ligero leaf from this farm, and one from this farm, and one from that farm, and a Seco leaf from, and they separate it by Ligero and Seco and what have you, and they make the cigars. Now, with that being state-run, anybody knows, and not to get into politics, but anytime the government runs anything, wages are low, bureaucracy is bad, whatever, go on and on about that, the quality control goes down. So, for instance, this cigar came in a 5-pack box, okay? So out of 5, this is one of 4 that were smokable. The first one I pulled out was so tight and overdrawn, and it had knots in it. I mean, I hit it with the punch tool, and I just chucked it. Actually, I didn't chuck it. I gave it away to a guy who never smoked a Cuban cigar, and he swears that he got it going, and he enjoyed it. But he had never had one, and he had been wanting one for years and years and years. So when you pay $5,000, $6,000 for a box of cigars, that's a lot of money to burn, literally. You want to know that every cigar you pick up is not only going to be the same consistency and flavor, but the construction is going to be there as far as drawability and flavor. It's nothing more. I've never, ever had a box. Now, short story, I moved out of the United States when I was 18, and I went to the Philippines. And then from there, I came back, joined the military, and after I got out of the military, I ended up in the Middle East working as a government contractor, doing security contracting. So I was able to pretty much only smoke Cuban cigars. Not that I was able. You really just can't get Nicaraguan, Honduran, Dominican. You could get a Davidoff because they're in the shops. But, I mean, if you're going to spend $20, $30 for a cigar, whatever. I'm not a big fan of all the Davidoffs, not the ones that were available there. So I was a big Cohiba, Robusto guy. Everybody knew that's what I smoked. So if they came over to visit and they were going to be staying 2 nights in the international zone, which was a area of international companies in the middle of Baghdad where all the contractors stayed. Instead of staying in their little shacks that they had them for 1 or 2 nights, they'd call me up and say, hey, Laird, can I stay at your compound for the night? Give me a room. If I had a room available, I'd say sure. So anytime that happened, I didn't charge them, but they would always bring me a box of Cuban cigars. They'd take about 5 or 6 of them. We'd smoke. I'd end up with about, half a box. But this happened over and over and over, so I was pretty much smoking Cuban cigars for free. So much so that I walked into my father's office one day and he had a full box of Esplendidos that somebody brought him for Christmas. Full box. Beautiful box of cigars. And by the time I got in there, he had already cut 10 of them in half. Okay, because my dad don't give a shit. He likes to chew on cigars, he smokes them, but he doesn't really get into them. He's not a nerd like I am and like you are probably for watching this. Anyway, so I've got a pretty good experience with Cuban cigars, and I do like them, but I don't think they're the best. Other than like my first love, the Cohiba Robusto, I like Nicaraguan cigars. I like the Nicaraguan tobacco. I like the blends of cigars that you can take a Connecticut broadleaf and slap it on top of a Nicaraguan binder and throw in some Dominican Pelotico or Seco. I really like that. Okay. What I would like to see in the future, I don't know if it'll ever happen, is the day that we can take a Connecticut broadleaf wrapper and wrap it around a Nicaraguan binder with Cuban Ligero mixed in with Dominican Seco. That's going to be a whole new world. That's just like a dream, and it'll happen hopefully sometime in my lifetime. But Cuban tobacco, okay, and another little history lesson. At one time in America, there were like 40,000 cigar manufacturers in America, okay? A lot of people smoke cigars. And Cuban cigars have always been expensive, always, because that's, that one time they were the prestige, they were the hallmark of a cigar. Whereas you would go in and buy a White Owl, which was once a hand-rolled long filler cigar, for a nickel. A Cuban cigar would be like 15 cents, maybe 20 cents. So it's always been the pinnacle of cigars. Since about the mid 80s, probably all the way up until the late end of the 90s, from 96 on, when we had a big cigar boom. It was about when I got into cigars, right on the cusp of that, as it was beginning. Other cigar manufacturers, and the cigar manufacturers that were forced out of Cuba, like the people that owned Monte Cristo, the people that the families that owned all these different Hoya de Monterrey, I'm getting a brain fart here. They all left, and they all moved, and they all started their farms in Dominican Republic, Nicaragua, Honduras. Mainly Dominican Republic is where they started, and they changed the name of cigars until the early 80s, where they figured they filed a lawsuit and blah 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 blah, and they were able to use their name. So Monte Cristo came back out, which was Monte Cruz before that, if I'm correct on that. So that's why you have Cohiba Havana, and you have Cohiba Nicaragua, and you have Monte Cristo and Romeo and Juliet. And I know it's Romeo y Julieta, but I say Romeo and Juliet because I'm Anglo. So anyway, that's where we're at. Are Cuban cigars the best cigars in the world? The answer to that would be no. Is Cuban tobacco good? Yes, it's extremely good. But you can't say, people, I call them chooches. You ever heard somebody call somebody a chooch? The guy that walks in, he's like, yeah, I smoke cigars. Yeah, what do you like? What kind of cigar you like? Cubans. Oh, what's your favorite Cuban? Cohiba. So, and chances are he's probably only smoked one of them. Or you get the question all the time, you got a cigar hanging out of your mouth, someone's like, hey, is it Cuban? And you got like, no, and they give you that look like, oh, you ain't smoking shit. Or if you do say, yeah, actually, it is a Cuban, they're like, bullshit. It's just a mystique, okay? Are they worth getting? Yeah, if you can afford them, if someone's going to give them to you, if you got friends like that, or if you just want to save up some money and splurge, and there's ways to get them now. I mean, if you want to go to Cuba, you can bring them in now. There's, some secure websites that you can order them from, but this cigar is probably counterfeited more than a Rolex. Okay, I think it's a $6-7 billion a year industry counterfeiting Cuban cigars. So you got to be careful. Okay, you really got to be careful. So the only real way to know, if you're not familiar with the cigars and how they taste, and and how the bands look and all that, they change them up and they have guides. Like that. This is the first one I've ever had with a holographic band on it. This is the first time I've ever experienced that. But you got to be careful, because you will. Some of these online places, I don't know. I have yet to do. When I was in Baghdad, I did order some Cuban cigars from an online place, but I was not ordering the ones I could get right there. I was ordering more of the short filler Cuban cigars, and the name escapes me, but it's more of a Cuban cigar for Cubans. And you don't really see those too much in the store. And they didn't have the the Hoya de Monterrey Epicure. They didn't have that. It just went. So I wanted to try it, and I wanted it, so I ordered it, and they were real, and they were good. So, but the flip side to that is, if you order it and they send them to you, and that day customs decides to look at it and they take your shit, well, you're SOL. They're not going to refund your money. But in this day and age, I mean, really, all the money's going to anti-terror. So I wouldn't be hesitant to order from some of these places. But I recommend that you try them if you haven't tried a Cuban cigar, just so you can know for yourself that no, they're not all that they're cracked up to be before you smoke them. The construction it's not terrible, okay? It's not terrible. I mean, this cap is pretty even, and the the wrapper, they're a little bit, they're not silky and smooth all the time. They're bumpy. There's some knots in this one. Like I said, you pull them out and the draw's normally tight on them, so you can really be brokenhearted if you spend a lot of money that you can't afford to spend, when you can go to your brick and mortars or online and get a Dominican, Nicaraguan, blended cigar, Honduran that are so much better. Okay, I always tell people, if you really want to know what this thing tastes like but better, try the Last Call by AJ Fernandez. I mean, that to me is a Cuban tasting cigar. The Don Pepin Garcia Black, the Cuban classic, that tastes like a Cuban cigar. I mean, just like a Cuban cigar. Now, there's people out there that are like, oh, the only use cedar sticks to light my cigar. Get Panabla with that. I don't subscribe to that. Now, I have been there. I've cedar stick, and I've been through all of that. But what I've learned is, it's my cigar. I'm going to enjoy it. You didn't pay for it. You're not smoking it, so you shouldn't have anything to say about how I'm smoking my cigar. But anyway, I do encourage you to try to get one. Don't go out of your way. Don't get one unless you know it's going to be legit. Don't waste your money. And the reason why I encourage people to do that is because they'll sit back and say, oh, while this cigar is good, okay, and you will notice a distinct Cuban flavor once you get through them. And that distinct flavor is kind of like I call it a grassy hay flavor, hay field. It's kind of a musty, peppery kind of, especially on the Cohiba, because it utilizes Ligero, which is the top part of the plant, right before the medias tiempo, which hardly ever grows and hardly anybody uses that leaf. But the Ligero from Cuba is delicious. It is great. But you go to get you a Monte Cristo that's just using Seco and Carrillo or whatever the other leaf is they're throwing in there. It's a little bit more mild, kind of grassy, airy, but the distinct flavor of a Cuban cigar, they do have it, and that's what connoisseurs, and cigar snobs go for. Chooch ain't gonna know the difference. You know what I mean? He's probably saving his bands and putting these around some JR alternatives. But that's my take on the whole thing. I'm not going to review this cigar because it's been reviewed to death. There's not much I can say about it. It's a pretty plain Jane cigar. It does utilize Cuban, Seco, and Ligero. So the Siglo brand is kind of new. This one wasn't even debuted until 2002, and it was kind of created to fill a void. They just couldn't keep up with demand, and I think Davidoff had moved out completely, so they kind of just moved this new line of Cohiba into that to fill that spot. But it uses the Ligero and Seco, like I said, and it's got a creamy texture, and of course I've let it go out now, but it's got a more creamy texture. It's a mild cigar. It's got a sweet hay flavor to it, and that it's got that musk on the musty on the retrohale. So if you're not retrohaling the cigar, I would say don't waste your money. I mean, really, it's kind of like taking a very, very high-end bottle of whiskey. And I'm not a whiskey guy, but I understand guys that are. If I were to pull out an 18-year Scotch and throw it into my Coca-Cola, you might have a shit conniption. Like, what the hell? Like, why are you wasting your money? Just throw some Johnny Walker Red in there. You're mixing it. So, to me, if you're not retrohaling, if you don't know how to retrohale, you need to learn, because you only have 5 taste receptors on your palate, and you're going to be looking for taste. Like, I don't taste sweet hay, grass, or leather, or chocolate, or coffee. I just don't. I taste a little creaminess. I taste a little sweetness, maybe a little bitterness, but I'm not getting that core tobacco, deep earth. That's because we're getting that in our nasal capacity, where you have like 60 or something like that. I don't know, and I'm sure you know that already. But for those of you that are still on the coming up and learning, really learn how to retrohale. And I'm not going to do a whole seminar on that. Maybe I will if people start asking me for it. I'll explain it. I don't know how not to retrohale. I have tried to smoke cigars without retrohaling. I don't know how anymore. So I'm fortunate there. So I really can pick up the flavors. Can I tell that I'm smoking a Cuban cigar if I don't have a band on, I don't know if it comes from Cuba. I would say about 75% of the time I can. That's how distinct the flavor will become after you get writ on the flavor and the flavor notes that come with Cuban tobacco. Like I said, with the AJ Fernandez last call, a friend of mine gave me that cigar and told me to guess what country it was, because I was talking a whole game of shit like I can tell, because I think I can. Sometimes I can taste a cigar that's Honduran tobacco, which I'm not a big fan of when it's a Puro, or a Dominican Republic cigar when it's a Puro with a Connecticut shade. It's just too light for me. Nicaraguan, I kind of taste it. I'm getting better at it. And it does take some time, I believe, to develop that. But he handed it to me and said, "Tell me where this comes from." And I, with hands down, after like a good half inch, I was like, "This is Cuban." I didn't recognize the size because it was like a 4-inch by 52. And I know Cohiba just came out with a real 4-inch cigar, so I thought maybe that was it. And he was like, "It ain't Cuban. Keep going." And I'm like, "Bullshit, it's Cuban." Come to find out, it's Nicaraguan. And I don't remember the makeup of that. I think it's got the Ecuadorian Habano wrapper on it. But everything else is Nicaraguan. So there you go. That is my take on Cuban cigars. So let me just run back on that. Yes, you should try them. Okay? Yes, you should. If you're reading Cigar Aficionado and you're talking to people, you want to know. Okay? And you don't want to be a chooch talking about, yeah, they're the best, and you haven't smoked them. Smoking one's probably not going to blow your socks off. Okay, mentally it will, because if you've been waiting a long time, like I was when I first got my first Cuban, I was just psyched about it, and luckily mine was an Esplendido, which is a good cigar, so I really liked it. When I first smoked the Monte Cristo number 2, I think it was, I was so excited about it. I got it, and I just didn't like it. I mean, I smoked it and I showed it off, but I really did not enjoy it that much. I really liked the at the time, I liked the I forgot what it was. It was an Ashton cigar. It was an expensive cigar, but it was real creamy and sweet, vanilla, Connecticut shade wrapper, where my tastes were at that time. But yes, you should. All right, where was I? Sorry, I had a phone call. Anyway, where was I at? So I was saying, yes, you should try a Cuban cigar. No, don't waste your money unless you know it's coming from a legit source. In my opinion, no, they're not the best cigars. They're good cigars. They're not the best. And in my opinion, I'll go ahead and shoot it out there. Like I said earlier, I believe Nicaraguan cigars are kind of like the pinnacle of cigars right now as far as quality and construction. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got some information off of it. If I was wrong about anything, or even if you disagree, feel free to send me a message or post if you hit that subscribe button. Again, I have got some good cigars lined up. I'm just like, when I'm in my truck, when I'm working throughout the day, I'm writing down, I'm keeping a pulse on what's new. I don't want to do a bunch of reviews on, say, like a Romeo and Juliet, that everybody's already done. So I really want to get this channel off the ground. Shout out to my boy Joseph Cali, way up north in the Republic of New Yorkistan. A little side note, that's where I got the name Cigar Sherpa from. I just ended up talking to him on one of the Facebook sites. I think he's new to cigars. Cali, I may be wrong about that. I just figured maybe the way we were talking that he just kind of got started in cigars in the last couple of months, and we talked back and forth, and I put him on to some cigars that I thought he would like, and he liked them. So he called me a Cigar Sherpa, and I was like, hey, that's a good name. So shout out to my boy Joseph Cali, fellow Paisan up there in the Republic of New Yorkistan. This has been Laird Mayhew, your Cigar Sherpa, reminding you to be polite to everybody you meet, but always have a backup plan in case you got to shoot them in the face.